Okay, so I guess I'll introduce myself again. I'm Kim Strader, and I am the volunteer coordinator with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. And welcome. I'm so glad you could join us this afternoon. We'll go through a couple housekeeping things really quick. As I've said, everyone is muted whenever you enter, and this is being recorded. If you have any questions during the presentation, Kylie will answer those at the end. So go ahead and put them in the chat and I will work on tracking those questions. And just so you know, next week we will send you all a follow-up email that will have a link to this recording. And then also to some additional information resources that you may be interested in. Also to information on how to sign up in case you would like to become a Bluebird monitor. And for anyone who's viewing this later who was not signed up for today's program, you can always email us at volunteer@loudounwildlife.org. If you have any questions or would like to participate in the Bluebird monitoring program. So real quick, an introduction to Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy for those people who are maybe not familiar with our organization. We're a nonprofit organization that works solely within Loudoun County, and we are a volunteer-driven and donation-supported organization. Our mission is to inspire, motivate, engage people to protect, preserve, and restore wildlife habitat. And we do that through all of our programs. And our program areas are education, habitat restoration, advocacy, and citizen or community science, as it's now being called. And of course, our Bluebird monitoring program is one of our citizen science programs. So we encourage you to become a member and donate to help us create a place where people and wildlife thrive together. So be sure and check out our website. It's loudounwildlife.org to check out all the programs and all the things we have going on, as well as there's buttons to join or make donations. So today we're here to talk about Bluebird monitoring and just a little bit of background on our Bluebird program. It is one of the largest in the state of Virginia. We have 52 trails that are monitored by over 170 volunteers. And we just started keeping track of our home boxes, people who have boxes at home or little trails at home. And I believe we are up to 10 or 15 of those as well. So today our presentation is being brought to us by Kiley Gannaway. And Kiley is a new member of our Bluebird leadership team, and she assists us with education and training. And we're really fortunate to have Kiley with us. She is entering her 7th year of monitoring, and she monitors at Zephaniah Winery and the Blue Ridge Center for Environmental Stewardship. Kiley was born and raised here in Loudoun County, and she is an elementary school teacher. So with that, I will go ahead and dim my video and turn it over to Kiley.
All right, thank you, Kim, and it's great to have you guys here today. Like Kim said, this is I'll be entering my 7th season this March of Bluebird monitoring. I moved back to the area after college and wanted to find a way to meet new people, get involved, and give back to the community. Just happened to stumble upon Loudoun Wildlife and get involved in the Bluebird monitoring program. I can't go a weekend without it, and if I don't monitor, something feels missing from my life. So, oh yeah. Kim.
Real quick, Kiley, your voice sounds a little muffled or almost like an echo.
Okay. Is this any better?
No, that's weird because when we were testing things were fine.
So it's not, I don't need to project more. It's just not coming through well.
Oh, that's much better.
Oh, is it still better?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't change anything, so that's good.
Okay. I'll let you know if her voice gets okay.
Okay, that's perfect. Thanks, Kim. And I'm sure you guys know, in this season we're doing virtual and we're rolling with the punches. So thanks for your patience. But just to summarize, Bluebird monitoring is amazing. I don't know if you have been out yourself on a trail or if you're completely new to this, but today we're going to kind of meet you where you are and give a really big overview of bluebirds, their habitat, their diet, what they like, their behavior, and then introduce you to what monitoring would look like if you're interested in getting involved. So we will jump right in, and here's our list of what we'll go over today. What is a bluebird? What do they look like? Their habitat, life cycle, diet, their declining population. Kim, you're back on. Is something wrong?
Yeah, it's getting feedback again. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Kim, would you mind, since you have access to the chat, if somebody else also is getting feedback, could they let us know? Because I wonder if you are getting feedback as well.
Okay, this is BJ. Originally, you sounded like a tin can, but right now I'm hearing you much better. Anybody else want to report?
Very
Couple.
muffled, feedbacky voice.
Yeah, someone's saying maybe get closer to the mic. It almost sounds like you're you've got it like on the computer and on your phone or another device at the same time. Now we can't hear you at all.
I will tell you guys, I was teaching virtually on this computer all last year, so I'm so disappointed. Kim, is this any better for you?
Yes, it is sounding better now.
Okay, are we at 100% or are we still struggling?
It's not perfect, but it's much better.
Okay, all right, do you want me to keep trugging along and we'll hope for the best?
Yeah, let's see, because I don't really know what else we can do.
Okay. Once we hit the population, there was a decline, but we do have some good news about bluebird numbers here, particularly in Loudoun County. We'll talk to you about some of the other birds that you might see on the trail if you monitor, and just the general about what a trip out monitoring would look like, and the nest boxes too. This is a beautiful quote that kind of summarizes that a mystical feeling you would get from bluebirds. They're very beautiful creatures, and they've been alluring people for many, many years. And I'll read this to you, and you can read it too. But this was written in 1903. How the waiting countryside thrills with joy when Bluebird brings us the first word of returning spring. Reflecting heaven from his back and the ground from his breast, he floats between sky and earth like the winged voice of hope. So pretty neat imagery there. So I just thought that was a beautiful way to start. That kind of encapsulates some of the magic that we feel going out on the trails. Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy works with a couple different organizations. We work with Virginia Bluebird Society, VBS, which was founded in 1996. They have trails all throughout Virginia. So Loudoun Wildlife is just inside of Loudoun, but we will take our end of the year data for bluebird monitoring, pass it on to Virginia Bluebird Society, and then they in turn work with North American Bluebird Society and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So they'll take our statewide data and then pass it on so we can continue to monitor and be stewards of these native birds. So if you ever see those acronyms online, that's what they stand for. And they're really great resources to Virginia Bluebird Society. If there's something that we didn't touch on today or that I can't answer, that's a great resource to check out. So jumping into the fun pictures here, going over what is a bluebird. We have a little quiz for you. It's not graded, don't worry. This picture up here on the right, is it a blue bird, just simply a bird that's blue, or is it a true bluebird? If you guys want to play along, you can put it in chat if you'd like, what you think. And maybe you'd be able to ID a couple of these species. This bird is not a true bluebird, but it's a blue jay, a bold and loud relative of the crow. Surprise. surprisingly. Okay, another bird for us. Just a bluebird or a true bluebird? A little bit of a deeper hue here on the breast. This is not a true bluebird. This is an indigo bunting, a songbird related to the cardinal. And our last bird quiz for today. Any thoughts on this one? I think some of you guessed it, not a true bluebird. This is a blue grosbeak, also related to the cardinal. Okay, we see these beautiful bluebirds, but what does a true bluebird look like? Here is the eastern bluebird, which we monitor here in Loudoun. It's a member of the thrush family and cousin to the American robin. You can see the very pronounced blue on the feathers and the head, and then a little bit of that brownish red on the chest too. There are a total of 3 species of bluebirds and 8 subspecies. Today we'll briefly hit on the 3 species. Like I just said, eastern bluebird is here in Loudoun, western bluebird, and then mountain bluebird. The mountain bluebirds can tolerate much more of the cold compared to the eastern bluebirds can. And the western bluebirds can span up to Canada as well. So you can see the little differentiation between them, but still very similar. Here we've got a whole happy family in their home. The male is on top, obviously has that brighter plumage to attract the mate. The female is a bit duller, the same coloring, but just it's not as eye-popping. And then the juvenile is peeking its head out of the nest box. That baby has a spotted chest. Again, much more muted colors to stay camouflage from prey. So you will notice, especially if you come out and join us on the trails, we do get to see baby bluebirds fledge, and they won't grow into their color in those first few weeks of their life. And I'm not sure how this sound will come through, but I do have a bluebird call for you. So I'll play it and hopefully you can hear some of it. It's a very light call, a beautiful melody, and it's really nice to listen to when you're out on the trail. So now that we can identify a bluebird, let's talk about the different habitats that you might find one in. Some of you might be surprised to find out that your home, your backyard, would be an ideal habitat for a bluebird. Here's a great map showing where bluebirds reside permanently and then where they would go for breeding. As you can see, these bluebirds, they can travel the span of the United States and down into Mexico too, which is really neat. They're very pervasive. So as a native species, it's great to see them have this big of a range where they can survive and thrive too. Any area that's open that has some scattered trees and typically lower brush in the grass is really enticing to a bluebird. So places, as you can see, like parks, golf courses, even cemeteries, wineries, which I get to monitor at, and some schools have been interested in doing trails too. Bluebirds like that area as well. One exciting thing that we learned from our 2021 data is that more bluebirds fledged at home boxes compared to any other habitats or trails that we've monitored, which is really exciting. Some of you guys might have a busy schedule and aren't sure if you could commit to monitoring once a month from spring to fall. And you might be interested in doing a nest box at your home. Well, bluebirds really can, that can be a great area for them to breed. So we can always help you with that and get you that information if you'd be interested. In addition to these areas, specifically where a bluebird would stay, they are secondary cavity nesters, meaning they like holes or cavities in trees, and that they'd be called a snag, a new vocabulary word for you. It's just a dead or dying standing tree. I don't know if you've seen old fences, farm fences with the big posts that kind of have some cavities in them too. That's a favorite home for bluebirds as well. jumping into their life cycle. We know what they look like, we know where they live, how do they breed and grow, and what would a monitor see from week to week when they're out on the trail. So February is right around the time that a male will select a nest site, and a female will help with that too. And the male will begin to sing for 2 reasons. He'll attract a mate, and he'll also warn away other males claiming his territory. Bluebirds can live near each other, but when we make new trails, we make sure that each nest is far enough away so that there's not too much competition for food or territory. So after the male sings his song, right around March, a female will respond, and they'll begin to make a nest together. Right around late March or early April, they'll begin to make their nest, and that takes 5 to 10 days. The telltale sign that it's a bluebird nest is it's extremely neat. It's made with dried grasses and pine needles, and it's wrapped together very tightly. The female will mold the nest out into a little cup with her breast, and you know right away, okay, if it's clean, if it's neat, it's likely a bluebird. Once they've got their home chosen and created, the female will lay her clutch, and it'll be about 1 egg each morning for 3 to 6 days. And here you can see them hanging out on top of the roof. And anytime I go monitoring, there's going to be a bluebird hanging out right there watching me until I get closer. So a really cool fact that I didn't know when I was monitoring, I got really nervous when I opened a bluebird, when I opened a nest box, and I saw this nest that was clearly bluebird. If you see in this bottom right picture, it's just how I described to you. It's very clean and it's very neat. But I saw white eggs in there, and I wasn't sure what had happened. I didn't know if it was predation from another species, because that can happen, as we'll talk about later. Other species will try to move into a bluebird's territory. Some species even peck those eggs to death. So I was really concerned that predation had happened. Actually, what I didn't know is that about 5% of bluebird eggs are white. So if you're ever monitoring with us and you see that too, don't worry. It's actually pretty neat, and I get excited when I see it now. I feel like, oh, it's going to be a really special bluebird family. But typically, as this middle picture depicts, it's a very nice light pale blue. That's quite beautiful. So the female will incubate her eggs for about 2 weeks, and she'll continually turn them to stay warm and so they don't get stuck to the side of the shell. And during these 2 weeks, as a monitor, you keep track of the last person who went to check on the nest box. So if I go on Saturday and then my friend goes the next Saturday, she'll read Kiley's notes. Oh, what did Kiley say? If the eggs were just laid, it's safe to open the nest and check on them again, and then report how many we see. So as a monitor, we write the species that we see, and we write how many eggs we see and how old they are. So up until those weeks, all we're doing is checking to make sure no predation, that the eggs are being warmed, and we look to see if mom and dad movement, that they're taking care of their chicks. After those 2 weeks have passed, woohoo, we have babies. Yes, they look a little bit like aliens, in my opinion. They will begin to make their way out of their shell. And this guy on the left, mom and dad will help him get the rest of his shell off when he's ready. They have just a teeny little bit on them. Otherwise, they're pretty raw and vulnerable guys there. So I love these pictures. You can really see that, the brightness of the blue there. Once those babies come out, they are extremely hungry. They are being fed up to 5 times each hour. Mom and dad are both on the move to get these chicks fed and happy. And that'll happen from dawn to dusk. So at this point in time, as a monitor, we are still allowed to open the nest box and check on the babies. Bluebirds will get, what I've noticed, at least personally, they're not extremely protective over an empty nest. But I noticed the second that a baby has hatched, mom and dad are typically flying around overhead, getting really upset with me. So as a monitor, we make sure to get in and out quickly to respect the animals and respect the birds. But they're busy feeding their young, and they're feeling really protective at that time too. Something that mom and dad also have to do, and if you're a parent, you know this, you got to feed the kids and you got to clean up after them. Sometimes there's no way out of it. Mom and dad have to carry the fecal sacks out of the nest, get the waste away. We don't want to attract predators, and we don't want to encourage the germs that come along with that. So parents here are very busy caring for their young. And right here we've got, this is a great sheet that's actually in our binder for every monitor and every trail too. Just a reminder of what the bluebirds will look like on the day that they are. And this picture here, we wanted to let you know, this is not taken by one of us. Anyone who is holding a bird has been trained. And as monitors, we don't touch and hold the birds. We're there to observe and to help with conservation. Right around day 8, if you can see on the left side, is when the bluebirds begin to open their eyes. And then around day 11 or 12 is when the bluebirds become really squirmy. So they are moving around. If there are 5 to 6 baby chicks in that nest, they're packed in tight. It's at that day that us as monitors, we don't open the nest box until we know the birds have fledged. One of the reasons we do this is for their protection. I'm sure you can imagine a nest box out at a winery. If we open it up and those birds are 13 days old, they're tightly packed in there. One tiny move, the baby could fall out. If they're not ready to fly, they are perfect prey. So for their safety, right around day 12 is when we don't touch the box and we let them develop. But it's pretty neat to see in just a few days how big of a change that they have. And I don't know about you, but I'd say only about day 9 is when they start to look like a true bluebird. But I do love the little peach fuzz they get at day 3. That's one of my favorite times. And 2, as a monitor, you're going to observe this up close and personal up until day 11 or 12. So you will see the progression. These baby chicks will fledge between 16 and 20 days old. They will not return they won't return back to the nest, but they do stay near their parents. And about the data that I've recently read is about 2% of the time, those chicks will come back and help their parents for the next brood, which is pretty neat. And as I've stated, we don't open the box after 12 days to avoid premature fledging. And now here, I think it's better depicted what the juvenile looks like with the spotted breast. They do camouflage really, really well in the habitat that they're at. And as they begin to mature, their feathers will become deeper and darker blue. Just some neat facts about bluebirds. They can raise families from 2 to 3 times per year, and some of the chicks will come back to help with that other brood. Once the chicks fledge, just so you guys know what we do next, we don't leave a nest in that nest box for the rest of the season. We will carefully clean it out. We take that debris and we move it elsewhere. If we were to just spread it out right on that trail, we'd attract more predators. So we take it and discard of it somewhere else. And then that box is prime location for another family to start a new brood. And this is just a fun picture. The joys and trials of parenthood. I think it shows it both well. Moving on now to diet. Okay, we know what bluebirds look like. We know where they live. We know how they grow, but what's getting them to be so beautiful and strong? In the summertime, when you would likely be out on the trail, bluebirds are eating primarily insects. It's about 60 to 80% of their diet. They don't do the typical seeds that you might put outside in a bird feeder. They are not interested in that at all. And that was new, something new for me to learn. So they love, they'll do sometimes beetles, salamanders, spiders, they like that. And then they also really love native plants as well. So some of the ways that bluebirds get these, they will sit up high on a perch and be actively looking for their food and then fly down and grab it. Occasionally, you might see a bluebird laying on the ground with their wings out. That's another way that they hunt for different insects in the grass too. So it's a little bit easier, or it saves energy for them to gather from the ground, and it takes more energy to fly, understandably. But you will see them flying and catching prey. In the winter, when insects aren't as widely available, bluebirds are primarily eating berries. So if we have a hard winter with a lot of ice that's freezing berries, that can be an issue for bluebirds' survival. Some people want to attract bluebirds to their home. You could do pre-soaked raisins, so just throw them in water for a little bit and leave them out. Again, they wouldn't be drawn by a typical feeder with seed. But the best way and the most sustainable way too to help these bluebirds is to be planting native plants in our backyard. You don't have to have every single one. You don't have to love every single one, but if you have an area, even a potted plant that's a native plant, we know that native plants are great for our environment and great for us, and it's great for the bluebirds as well. So things like holly, cedar, mistletoe, they love, and that sustains them through the winter months. Now we'll move on to talking about the decline of population in bluebirds and then the recent uptick in population that we've seen, especially with the help of monitors here with Loudoun Wildlife. So during the colonial times, the bluebird was incredibly common. Everywhere you look, you see one, just like the American robin. But then starting in the 1950s, the house sparrow was introduced from England. Some people say, or some people believe that colonists here wanted to have a little bit of home from England, so they brought the house sparrow. Other people say that they were brought to try to lower the insect population. And then some people say that the starlings and house sparrows were brought because Shakespeare mentioned them, so they wanted them here in America. Either way, terrible idea. Once that happened, bluebird population plummeted as a direct result of that. In 1872, 4,000 songbirds were introduced too as an experiment, did not go well. And like I shared, within that year period, several decades, bluebirds were almost extinct. And up until recently, most people would say that they had never seen a bluebird in their life. So if you have seen one, we're part of that new generation, and because of the efforts of people like Loudoun Wildlife supporting these bluebirds. And then in addition to just general human influence and how we've kind of tampered with bringing species over, there are other factors too that affect the population size. You can tell this bluebird's a little grumpy about it, but weather, like we already shared, frozen berries in winter can be very detrimental. Predators, including the house sparrow, we'll touch on that in just a little bit. Availability for food and competition for nest sites can be an issue, as well as different environmental controls, some that we influence and others that we don't. One of the ones being what humans really play into is loss of habitat. I shared earlier that bluebirds would, just like this picture on the right, bluebirds would use a fence post like this if it was larger and it had a cavity in it. But now that we're becoming more modernized, if you've been here in Loudoun for 15 years, you've seen it change from horse country. Now we're wine country and data center country. So you know that we've seen a big difference. But losing these farm areas and these trees have caused a difference. And we can even think on our own property, even if we just have a half acre or so, when a tree is dead, we take it down. When a branch is dead, we take it down for the safety of ourselves and others. But the disappointing thing is that that would have been the perfect cavity for, say, a bluebird to live in. So we contribute to this in small ways. But as monitors, that's what we're helping, right? We are emulating nature with our nest boxes to help their population. And then the last thing that we'll touch on with this is herbicides and pesticides that farmers use or that we use, Roundup for weeds. You guys know this, it can interfere with the cleanliness of water and bluebird food. So that pollution can affect bluebird population size. Okay, we will touch on those invasive species that can also be detrimental to bluebirds. And even after this, if you decide not to become a monitor with us, I would still challenge you to keep your eyes peeled for some of these species. You've probably seen them more than you realize, and you might have seen their damage before too. The first one that we'll talk about is one of the biggest issues. The picture on the top right is the house sparrow. Again, these were brought over from England. Another quote from W.L. Dawson is, without question, the most deplorable event in the history of American ornithology was the introduction of the English sparrow. That is a big statement to make, but I understand why it was said. House sparrows are very dirty creatures. Their nests are made of trash. Sometimes they're made of dead remains of birds that they've killed. And they just bring a lot of pest and nastiness with them. The picture on the bottom right is a European starling, which we touched on as well, but these are birds that will directly compete for territory, for nest sites, and for food with bluebirds. As I shared, house sparrows will chase or kill any bluebirds, and sometimes they'll peck chicks to death. Yeah, and there's a little gross picture for you, but house sparrows mean business. So as a monitor, we are trained how to identify house sparrow nests right away so that we can remove the nest. We do that before eggs are laid to discourage house sparrows from nesting there. Something about the house sparrow, they will imprint as a young chick. So if a chick fledged out of a nest box, they'll imprint on a nest box, and instead of going and having a nest in a tree in adulthood, they'll want to be in a nest box as well. So we have to be very careful. That's why Loudoun Wildlife, we make sure that we're diligently monitoring every trail that we set up. So it's not, oh, let me just set up a trail here and there. It can't be like that, or else we will encourage house sparrows, invasive species, to take over. So we have to be diligent to monitor the trails that we've set up to be on the lookout for invasive species, such as the house sparrow. And it depends on a couple of the trails that I've been. You kind of notice ebbs and flows of the season or of the trail, but there might be a time when all you feel like you're doing is just identifying house sparrow nests and saying, oh gosh, I better get this out before they complete it, before they lay an egg. And it's really exciting when you stay on top of that. And then finally a bluebird gets in a nest box, and you know that the bluebird's gonna make his nest and have a family there. So the good news is not all of the birds that you would see on the trail too are invasive species or a danger to bluebirds. Some are friendly neighbors. And for these neighbors, we cannot do anything to their nest. If we identify that it's a wren's nest, monitors do not touch that because they're native birds. They're protected by law. We can't take them out of the nest boxes. We only do that for the non-native species that are a danger to the native species. And again, if you're interested in becoming a monitor, we will go through all of this in greater detail in another training or when we have you come out. So here are some of the friendly neighbors to bluebirds. Number one, woodpeckers. These guys are primary cavity nesters, meaning they'll peck a hole in a tree, use that, and then the bluebird, once the woodpeckers are done brooding there, bluebirds might say, oh, this is a great home, and jump in. Hence, bluebirds are called secondary cavity nesters. So this is a great relationship. Another friendly neighbor would be a tree swallow. These birds also have pretty neat and finely wrapped nests, but the reason you'd be able to identify it is bluebirds don't have any feathers in their nest, but as you can see in this top picture, a tree swallow will have a little, like a little comforter of feathers on the top, a little downy pillow for their eggs. This is my experience, but when I've monitored, I say that tree swallows are bold and protective. When I first went out, they would swoop down towards me to try to scare me and get me away. And that was before there was even a fully developed nest. So I opened the box thinking, oh my gosh, they're so protective today. They're flying around really close. They must have 2-day-old babies. No, I open up and it's a little bit of grass in there. So that's what I've experienced, that tree swallows are very protective of their area. Two other friendly neighbors are the chickadees and the tufted titmice. These guys will build a mossy nest and lay little white eggs with brown dots. I'll share on the trails that I monitor. I think I've seen maybe one chickadee nest. I'm much more likely to see tree swallows, bluebirds, and then eradicate a few house sparrow nests. And this guy is one of my favorites. I like how they're sized and proportioned, but the house wrens lay a really neat nest of sticks, or they make a nest of sticks, and then they'll lay these really tiny, they're much smaller than bluebird eggs, and they're tan. And they'll do about 6 to 8 eggs at a time, so a pretty big clutch there. Sometimes house wren nests can span the length of the nest box. So a bluebird nest might take up 1/3 of the box or 1/4. Especially as the chicks get older, that nest will begin to get padded down and smaller. But for the house wren, those sticks will be stacked really high. It can be a fun challenge to try to stick a little mirror in there when you're monitoring to see if they've laid eggs or not. And then just a neat fact about house wrens, the males will sometimes leave a dummy nest. So they'll go in and put sticks in a nest box, and you keep checking every week, getting really excited to see eggs, sticking the mirror in there, craning your neck to see, and nothing happens. That can happen sometimes. They are just trying to claim territory and kind of see, they're shopping around to see which nest box they like and trying to get other species away. So if you come and monitor with us, you might see that sometime too. Alrighty, we've talked about lots of other birds other than bluebirds, some positive, some negative, but now we'll get into what the nest box look like that are on Loudoun Wildlife trails and a little more of what it would physically look like and feel like if you come out to monitor with us. Nest boxes are very particularly placed. Like I've shared, we want to make sure that they're a certain distance away from one another to prevent any competition there. And then they also want to be a certain distance away from any heavily wooded areas. Sometimes if a nest box is too close to trees, you'll begin to attract more wrens because they're taking sticks from the trees and then building their nest. But if we want to do this primarily for bluebirds, we'd make sure that it would be in an open area with some tree coverage. A few major bullet points. This gets into the nitty-gritty, so we'll just gloss over it. But you want to make sure that there's drainage, ventilation, that a monitor can easily get into it, and a ladder on the front panel. So the picture on the right is a perfect example of what our nest boxes look like. There's a notice on each of them that it's with Loudoun Wildlife and that you have to be a trained monitor to open that bird box. So on the top, you can see this, it's like a metal wire in a rectangle that goes around the circle, the entrance of the box. That guard is to prevent raccoons, cats, and large birds from reaching in there, getting eggs or the mama. And then there is a metal cylinder at the bottom of the pole that's called a snake guard. Yes, I found this out and was very disturbed that a snake would climb up that pole, get into the box, get the eggs. People have seen it happen. It happens. So those snake guards prevent that. And they're actually put on intentionally loose. So sometimes in the wind, you can hear them knocking on the metal pole. And that's so the snake can't get any traction coming up. Just a little closer look at some of the protective devices we put on the nest boxes. And some different snake guard designs, but the ones that I've seen on my trails are just that metal cylinder like we saw in the photo. And heads up, if you're squeamish, raccoons, cats, and snakes, oh my, the nest box is like a lunch box or a snack box for some of these creatures. So again, it's important that we're diligently monitoring the boxes, and it's important that if we set up a new box, we're doing it very thoroughly to prevent any of these guys from getting in and having a snack. Now, some people understandably are concerned and say, oh my gosh, I don't want to monitor and I don't want to open a nest box because the bluebirds are going to smell me and they're going to leave their babies. If we monitor properly, bluebirds are entirely tolerant of that. Again, that's why you do have to be trained for this, but we can get you up to speed quickly. And we are doing this carefully. So our end goal is conservation and monitoring and observation. So we do it wisely and we do it well, but we are benefiting the bluebirds much, much more. And so don't feel like you're going to cause a parent to leave a whole clutch. It's not the case, especially with careful monitoring. And that little note at the bottom, I've already shared that, but just again, we are diligent to prevent invasive species from staying around and getting too comfortable. After the nesting season, typically around August is when I've noticed things start to slow down, nests are emptier on trails. Bluebirds will flock and roost together to stay warm. I haven't seen it myself yet, but there can be closer, upwards of 10 bluebirds in a nest box in the winter staying warm together. That's sort of my next goal. I'd love to see them roosting together over the winter. And this nest box on the right, that's the mansion with the two entrances. It's a really nice one to monitor too. The birds seem to like that. We are nearing the end of our presentation. If you are interested in attracting a bluebird, again, we can talk more to you about that, but bird baths are a great way to attract any kind of bird too. In all seasons, birds will need a reliable source of clean drinking water and to bathe in. So if you are an avid bird watcher and you want to draw in some more birds, I'd say bird bath. And for bluebirds, those native species are really going to pull bluebirds in, particularly in the wintertime. Or you could do those pre-soaked raisins too as a treat. Bluebirds are fond of mealworms too. And the only reason though I wouldn't say do that all the time, just like when you go camping, you don't want to leave food out for the bears because they'll become dependent on that and continue to return expecting that. So with the bluebirds, we want to support them, but we want to make sure that it's ethical and sustainable. So the best way we could do that is by having native species, flowering species in our backyard to support bluebirds. And at this moment, we do have several openings in, I know, Leesburg, Percival, quite a few other places. If you are interested in becoming a monitor, It is a really great time. It can be kid friendly too if you want to get trained with your whole family. But if you guys are interested in that, we would love to have you come volunteer with it. I know it's been, it's a really special thing for me, and I was never an avid bird watcher. So it's really, it feels like you're a part of something bigger than yourself, and we certainly are. And we've seen that in the bluebird population. Loudoun Wildlife is making a direct difference in the lives of these native birds. So if you are interested, we would love to have you get in touch with us. It's a great way to give back to your community and to learn something new, which is really fun. So thank you guys so much for dealing with the tin can sound that's on your end. Well, I think we'll throw it back to Kim and see if there were any questions, and we'll leave you with next steps about how to get in touch and get involved.
Oops, I was muted.
We got you now.
And so there are no questions that have come through. If you have any questions, please be sure and enter them into the chat box and we can ask Kylie about it. We will send, as I said previously, but when we started, we'll send an email out next week to you that will have the link to the recording of this program, but we'll also include in there links to some helpful information resources for anything that you may be interested in. I will also include instructions on how you can sign up to become a monitor as well. As Kylie said, we do have some openings, Purcellville, Starling, Leesburg. I believe we have an opening in Hillsborough also. So yeah, we fill those with monitors, and it's all, and also too, it's on a first come first serve basis. We've had situations in the past where we've had more interest than what we've had spaces available. So just so you know, first come first serve. Someone is asking, do you need to live in Loudoun County or Virginia in order to participate in the Bluebird monitoring program? No, you do not need to be a resident of Loudoun County, but you do need to be willing to travel to Loudoun County or whatever area it is that that you will be monitoring on which trail.
But if you know someone who's interested in bluebirds, some of these resources, Virginia Bluebirds would be a good one. There might already be Bluebird monitoring program wherever you or your friend or family member lives, if not here in Virginia.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we have about 52 trails all throughout the county. We've got multiple trails that are like in the Ashburn area. And I do have a few openings in Ashburn as well.
And
How many times? Oops, a question.
I was just going to share, if you have any practical questions about what do you need for monitoring or what does it look like, feel free to add those in too.
And someone just did. How many times a month would I be monitoring? So we set our trails up so that there are a minimum of 4 people. So that means that each person would monitor once a month. And monitoring begins at the end of March, Kylie?
Yes.
And goes pretty much through August, maybe the first week of September. I think our last bird to fledge might have been September 20th last year. So that was pretty late. And so once a month monitoring, and the time commitment, it really depends on how many nest boxes there are on the trail. We have some trails that have like up to 30 nest boxes, and those trails can take about 2 hours. But we do have some trails that are more in the area of 10 or 15 boxes.
And Kim, if I could add to that, I would say expect maybe an hour to 2 hours, like you shared, for that one weekend that you go. And the way, in my experience, again, it might not be true across the board, but the trails I've worked at, I'm in communication with the other monitors. And at the beginning of the season, the trail lead sent out all of the dates. And so I consulted with my calendar and just signed up for once a month when it worked for me. So if you're concerned about the time commitment, I was really worried about it, but in my experience, it was very much, it was on my timetable and I was able to commit to when I was ready for it. And I found that once a month was completely doable and not too overwhelming. And it's great to have that team to to share that load too.
Someone is asking about a monitoring app for the phone. So we have done some work with developing a monitoring app. In fact, we had a high school student who did it as a project. But one of the biggest problems that we had with it, we have not resolved yet, is that the next person is not able to see the data that you entered. And that is very important that your next person can see what was recorded the week before, because as Kiley said, there's certain times when you get to be about 10 to 12 days where you do not want to open that nest box. So we are looking for ways to resolve that issue. I know that we do have some monitoring teams that are working and have their spreadsheet or their data sheet set up on a Google Drive folder that everyone then shares and does from their phone. And someone made a comment, Bluebird Trail of 50 house that need monitoring. I'm not sure what that's referring to. We do have trails there's several wineries that have trails. There's also several communities or homeowners association trails. We have a couple that are on school grounds, a couple that are at local parks, and we've got a couple that are at golf courses also. Does anyone have any other questions or comments or anything they would like to add?
I think those are really great questions so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And thank you. And I'm so glad everyone was able to join us today. We had 48 people that joined us on the call today. So, or on the program today, the program, whatever you call it. But anyways, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much, Kiley, for coming and sharing all of your knowledge that you've gained in your 7 years of working with us in the Bluebird program.
Yeah,
And
it's great to see you guys and great to meet you virtually today.
yes, and like I said, we'll be sending out an email next week with additional information and ways that you can get in touch with us.
All right, that's
Oh,
awesome.
real
Kim, thank
quick.
you. Oh, we got one more? Okay.
No. What is the spacing of nest boxes, the spacing between nest boxes that is preferred?
So I don't want to misspeak, but off the top of my head, I believe it's 100 to 125 feet. And we can get you to those nitty-gritty details of the length of the metal pole for the next box and the nest box sizes. We can always send that to you too, but just off the top of my head, that's what I believe it is.
Yes, and then someone just typed a comment. We organize our volunteers on the trails so that there is one trail leader who's pretty much overseeing, making sure that that they have the volunteers that they need, checking out, the condition of their boxes, making sure that all their boxes are in good working order. They also compile the data at the end of the season. They also facilitate the scheduling of volunteers for each week.
Hello. I was the person who commented about the trail here in South Riding. It's actually in Avonlea. and there's 50 houses that were put up about 6 years ago, and they've not been monitored or that, and I've been begun to clean them out. I'm a past biologist, work for Mass Audubon, have a banding license, all those sorts of things. And looking to try to put together, I'm not sure that I'm going to be living here in after June, and I'm trying to put together a program to have these boxes monitored.
Okay, can you send me an email about that, please?
I've been chatting with Mike here in South Riding about this, your treasurer. And
Oh, okay.
I don't know if he's mentioned it or not, but it's now getting to be that time. I've started to clean out the boxes, but it's now time to put a full program together. So if this adds, you said that you often have more volunteers than you have boxes. Would be a great opportunity.
Yes, thank you for letting me know about that. And
It should be Frank Gardner too. I'm using my wife's computer, and I was struggling with the chat thing. It didn't seem to want to work for me.
okay, thank you very much. And I will get in touch with you.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Let's see, we've got a couple more questions here we'll get to real quick. We had a problem with mini tree sparrows. So if you put up 2 boxes near each other, will it leave 1 box for bluebirds because the tree swallows are territorial? Do you know, Kylie?
If the boxes are close together. Is that what you're saying?
Let's see, we had a problem with so many tree swallows. So if you put up 2 boxes near each other.
Oh, to encourage bluebirds to come. I see. Like, here's one for the tree swallow, one for bluebirds. You could try, and maybe you're having a connection with me, knowing that tree swallows seem to be a bit protective. And honestly, depends on what species is going to get there first and fight hardest for it. So the only disappointing thing is, or the only thing to be aware of is we can't touch the tree swallows. They are protected. So you could try to put up a new one if you really wanted to see bluebirds on your property. But I would let you know that a swallow might just as quickly pick it up. But if you want to try to get some native plants too that would draw a bluebird in, that might give you some more luck too to entice them to your property.
Okay, and someone is asking, how do we get a nest box? I can tell you that Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy, we don't have the number that where we could like sell one to you. I think that going to a reputable place like Wild Birds Unlimited would be a good place to get a bluebird nest box. What do you think, Kylie?
Yeah, I think so. And two, just sitting down and thinking how Frank just shared, there are 50 boxes that haven't been monitored. So just really understanding that if you put it up, there is that responsibility with it. But Kim, I think that'll come out in the email too, right? The details of how you could put it together, get a guard, get the wire, so we can send that on.
Yes, one of the links that we'll send, it does have information about the dimensions and all the specifications for bluebird boxes.
Sure.
Because that's one thing you want to make sure that you have, there's specific dimensions for everything within the bluebird box. Oh yes, and someone reminded me, thank you Jason G, whoever you are. Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy is having an auction. It's called Birdhouses of Loudoun, where we partnered with local artists who have decorated birdhouses, and we have a lot of birdhouses, a lot of bluebird houses that are in that auction. So be sure and check that out. It's coming up at the end of February. I believe the auction opens on February 21st, and it runs through that last week of February, and it's a silent auction where bidding, and it's all online and everything. And there'll be information on our website at loudounwildlife.org.
I like that, Kim. Support a local artist if you don't want to try to get crafty and make it yourself. I know I couldn't do that.
Okay, so any other questions, or we're going to go ahead and wrap it up now. And thank you all so much for coming and asking all these great and wonderful questions. Alrighty, I think that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, guys.